Najeni wana sauti. My beautiful name is Shibani and welcome to another great episode of Conversations. And today I'm here at the Human Rights Watch offices that is in Kileleshwa, and we are here to hold a conversation with the executive director of Human Rights Watch, that is in Africa, Madam Mausi Segun. She's going to give us an overview of the world report on where Africa stands in terms of human rights and how it also relates to Kenya. Thank you. So, how are you, madam?
Okay. My name is Mausi Segun. I'm the Africa Director at Human Rights Watch. With my team, we cover issues of human rights and all kinds of thematic issues across Africa in at least 25 countries. It changes, goes up and down. I'm based in Abuja, Nigeria, but this is our biggest office in Africa. Is here in Nairobi.
Yeah, definitely. So, madam, yesterday you are releasing a report about the human rights violation, especially. I believe it's worldwide.
It is worldwide.
First, we're going to be focusing more on Africa and bring it more on the context of Kenya. But just
Sure.
just need to record my voice because it's going to be used in the recording.
Okay.
So yeah, as I was saying, we're going to be focusing in Africa and now bring it back home. Yeah.
Sure.
So according to the report that you released, yeah, can you tell us what stand you and what stood out according to you according to the report?
So the report is a summary of the analysis we've done of human rights situation in all of the countries. As you said, over 100 countries across the world, but here in Africa, about 25, 26 of them. I think the biggest issues for us have been around conflict and war contexts where, egregious abuses of human rights continue to occur, including the extrajudicial killing of hundreds and or in some cases thousands of people. I would start from the war in Sudan, where we have seen horrible massacres of, mostly especially in the Darfur area, mostly Africans by the more pro-Arab militia groups affiliated with one of the warring parties, the Rapid Support Forces around Darfur, especially in Western Darfur. In Grenada, especially, we documented the targeting of Masalit men and the killing, the rape of the women, their forced displacement from the area, basically cleansing the area of this ethnic group. So we call it ethnic cleansing. Other organizations and indeed governments like the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union have found that some of those actions actually amount to genocide. And this for us is deeply troubling because Africa had promised its people, the African Union had promised its people that there would be no repeat of what happened in Rwanda 30 years ago. Unfortunately, we are seeing that specter of genocide back on the continent. So that's deeply troubling. We also have out of Sudan one of the worst humanitarian situations in the world right now, with over 12 million people internally displaced, plus 3 million displaced outside the country as refugees. And so, when you have a context of war, the abuses that happen are scaled up. The intensity, the scale of it, how widespread it is multiplied, exponentially. And that is why we're concerned with, the context of war, and it's not just Sudan. We also have Eastern DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. We have the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. And then we have, still ongoing fighting and violence that may not be at the scale it was a few years ago in Ethiopia. It is between the Amhara militia Fano and the federal government. So you have, the end of the Tigray War. You would think that the country would have a respite, but no, that violence is ongoing. And then in South Sudan, the years of war, the civil war that has gripped that country since its independence in 2011 is still ongoing. They cannot even carry out an election to legitimize the government they've had since those years. And so we have that low-level conflicts still going on there. We have northern Mozambique. So we cannot ignore the size, the scale of the problem around wars. So that's perhaps one of the biggest areas that we focus on. The next would be just the repression of civil society. So the space that we all occupy, if you are not a government official, if you're not a military person, every one of us, human rights defenders, activists, journalists like yourselves, lawyers, teachers, we are all part of civil society. Once the government is intolerant of the expression of opinions that either diverge from theirs or criticizes their decision making, whether it's the process or the outcome. Once we see that intolerance, we see that there is a squeezing of the civic space that says only the government officials can speak, only the military people can make comments. That means that everyone else should be quiet. It's a denial of the right to freedom of expression, is a denial of the right to freedom of assembly, is a denial of the right to freedom of association. And all of these rights underpin the other rights. How do you have the right to education if you don't have the right to express yourself? How do you get information if you don't have the right to express yourself? How do you get the right to life if you don't have the right to information? If the information that you're getting is biased, it expresses only one side of the debate or the argument, or there's no debate at all, that is a challenge. So those two are biggest. There are other issues we work on, including the growing economic inequality in Africa, the climate change situation and environmental rights issues, all of that. But I think an umbrella issue is the impunity that flows out of the violations and abuses of these rights. The fact that those who are perpetrating these abuses are largely getting away with it.
Yeah, and the freedom of speech, has actually gotten a lot of people in trouble, not only locally but also internationally, even in the African soil. You have seen journalists being killed, people disappearing. Yeah, I would like you to relate it to the Kenyan context, because with the rise of social media, we have seen a lot of abductions that have happened here in Kenya. Can you please tell us what is the situation in Kenya according to your research and according to your data? What is the situation? What did Gen Z create, and how did it change the landscape of freedom and human rights here in Kenya?
So, I would say that it is a mixed bag. To a large extent, most Kenyans continue to enjoy their right to freedom of expression because, there is access to, for example, social media, the internet, even though there is some, informal taxation on it because of the cost, that is prohibitive and will then exclude some people. But it is the fact that social media and online activism or platforms create an opportunity to mobilize. And for that reason, they have become, or they are being perceived as threats by those in authorities. Because how do you control what people are saying online? So there are many countries, including Kenya, have introduced all of these cybercrime laws, that seeks to extend criminal offenses that would naturally exist, in print media, in traditional media, to online engagement and online speeches. Now, those restrictions, in many ways, can be used to deny, right, and to restrict the opportunities for freedom of expression. What has happened in Kenya around the Gen Z protests that you mentioned is the fact that the authorities found it very difficult to control these young people. And I think the fact that they could not easily identify leaders or arrowheads of the groups, because the mobilization was happening over multiple platforms and dispersed across many people, it was difficult. What they then went to do in the aftermath of that protest, which, by the way, I would count as a successful protest, because the ultimate goal was to get the government to stop the passage of the finance bill into law, which would have meant, more hardship for many ordinary Kenyans and the high cost of living challenges they already faced. It was successful because the president was basically forced to withhold his assent to the bill and send it back to Parliament, and the Parliament ultimately took, I think, the right political decision to stop, debate on that law.
Let me
So
tell
that's
you on that.
success.
When you say the right political decision, does it mean it affected our system economically? Was it hard? Why do you specify that it was only the right political move?
It was a political decision because ultimately the president is the leader
Yeah.
of the country. He is the leader of the party in the ruling party. If your leader says there's something wrong with what you're sending to me, it becomes a life-saving political decision for you to agree with him. And that's essentially what they said. They said, we agree with the president that this law, perhaps it's not the right time, or the issues that he's raised concerning it are legitimate, and then we're going to stop, the law from the bill from becoming law. So it was a political decision. That's what I meant. So in that sense, the protest was a success. The negative fallout and blowback from that is, one, the fact that the protests were met with such violence. Most of the days of the protests were largely peaceful. Perhaps the only day that we saw an exhibition of a level of violence and anger was the day that the protesters overran the parliament, and I think that the government was essentially panicked, and there were utterances made by the president. But in the aftermath, they have used, as our research showed, they have used CCTV capture on that day, showing people's faces, to then trace out the individuals that participated in the protest and the run on parliament. They have gone after them individually. They have used the pictures, the images that they were generated on CCTV to identify the individuals, go after them, abduct them. It's an abduction because those who went to pick them up did not identify themselves as security agents. They took them away and held them incommunicado without giving them reasons for their arrest, giving them the opportunity to inform anyone, having their lawyers in place, which are due process rights. They were not accorded that. Many of them have wound up dead. Their bodies have been found in different places across the country, not just in Nairobi. Those who managed to get themselves released have horrible scars to tell the story of what happened to them while in detention, and the kind of questioning, the line of questioning that they were subjected to, which made it clear, one, that the individuals who abducted them were from the security agencies. Two, that the purpose, the reason for their arrest was their participation in the protest. And of course, there was some pressure on them to try to indicate those who were funding them. I think that was in a bid for the government to scapegoat the donor community, the more established civil society organizations, and label them as the instigators of this violence. I've said it over and over again. I believe that this is an insult on the intelligence of these young, smart people that populate this country, who have the ability and the passion to decide for themselves and to say, we're saying no to this. It's not acceptable to us. They don't need anyone from anywhere, either funding them or pushing them to do anything.
And how does it make you feel when you hear the president saying that we should discipline, parents should discipline their children, and they will give them a disciplinary action? So how does it make you feel, and what does this reflect to the president in terms of how now he looks upon human rights?
I mean,
In addition to that, maybe if I may ask, you have seen leaders going into public rallies and insulting Kenyans. Is government being fair to Gen Z when it comes to matters freedom of expression? Leaders are insulting the Kenyans, action not being taken against them. But when the Gen Z goes to online or social media to, correct something about government, then now the law applies. Does it mean the law of Kenya only applies to local people?
As a matter of fact, it's not the law that is being applied even to Gen Zs. There is no law that says you cannot speak your mind. Like I said, the international law is very clear. Most of the treaties and conventions to which Kenya is a party and has ratified provide protection and safeguards for freedom of expression. Now, and these rights are also protected under the Kenyan constitution. So there is no law around that. What the president and his supporters are trying to do is to introduce some lopsided, misguided African sentiments into this, to say young people don't speak to adults that way. That is such a tired and, now inconsequential argument. And usually I'm an adult now, but I know that as adults you devolve to that in a way to deflect. When you're put under pressure, when a young person asks you the kind of questions that you don't have answer for, you deflect. It's a red herring. They're trying to, let's leave the issue, let's talk about this. No, the real issue is, are the young people asking for what is outside of the limit of their rights? As citizens of this country, do they have the right to ask their leaders, one, to take their opinion into consideration, two, to ensure that the processes that they are putting in place for the decision they are making and policies that they are making is in accordance with the law? And if the law there is a problem with the law, the parliament is the right place for them to take their challenges to, because the parliamentarians went to these people during election campaigning to ask them to trust them with their votes to rule and to govern on their behalf, to make laws on their behalf. And so if the people of the country say, this law that you're in the process of making does not represent our views, we are not happy with it, the parliamentarians ought to listen, because they are not there to serve themselves. They are there to serve the people. And so that's the difference, when we are adopting many of these democratic principles. We'd like to introduce elements that do not exist there and to ignore the elements that exist. Rule of law, respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, underpin any democratic system. You cannot have democracy that does not allow for opposition, difference in opinion, criticism, tolerance. That's the way that you refine yourself. Everybody must be teachable at some point. No one knows it all. Listening to the other side gives you an opportunity to improve yourself. And so, this is what the young people are asking of the government. It's nothing more than that.
So, Kenya is not only an economic giant, but it's also seen as a role model in terms of human rights and everything, yeah? Somehow. Somehow, yeah? Because even after the Gen Z process, we saw the Nigeria, they were so proud, they were saying, we also need to do this. We saw South Africa. We also saw other countries, stand up for what they want to believe in. Does these abductions hurt anyway in terms of Kenya's integrity and respect for human rights? And considering that it has also been, it is the only African country on the UN Council of Security. Does it hurt the Kenyan reputation?
So, two things. The enviable and honestly pride-inducing action of the young people of Kenya must be separated from the government response. What has been copied is what the young people of Kenya have done. They have been able to hold the government to account and say, we do not want this bill passed to law. And the government had to capitulate. That power came from the young people. The government ultimately had no choice if they were not looking for an insurrection. And so that's what helped to quell the protest. Once that was done, I think there was some talking to the young people. The president has acceded to your demands. Why don't you give him a chance, get into dialogue and all of that. In other African countries, we didn't see that happen. Now the government response is typical across board. We saw it in Uganda when the young people tried to get on the street. It was quickly clamped down on. In Nigeria, the same thing. Very quickly, people got killed. People got shot for trying that. And so the example and the exemplary conduct of Kenyan young people cannot be attributed to the government. The government is behaving true to type in an autocratic, right disrespecting manner that we must continue to call out. And so I don't think it's taken much away from what we knew of the government. It has largely, historically, especially the security forces of Kenya, and I would name the police in particular, it has a historical record of abuse and impunity, a lack of accountability for abuses, whether it's abductions have been happening in Kenya for a really long time. It's just that we have seen it at a scale that did not exist before. And now there is more reporting that's happened. Before, it was left to organizations like ours to go find out individual. Listen, our Kenya person has been documenting enforced disappearances in Kenya for at least the last 12 years. 12 years, largely carried out by the police and some of the intelligence agencies. But these days, the regularity with which it is happening and the number within a short space of time, between June and the end of the year, with almost 100 people, maybe 80 something according to the Kenyan National Human Rights Commission on Human Rights rather. Over 80 people, 20 something of whom are still missing till date. I don't think we've seen that record in such a short period of time. And that's what is challenging. But also the fact that it's not just Kenyans that are the target. Kenya is also becoming a franchisee for other countries to open their doors to allow them to come here, work with clandestine, I don't know who they are, Kenyan security agents to abduct citizens of those countries, to try to take them back. They have done it to 37 of those Ugandans who were here in Kisumu for a program. They were abducted in the middle of the night. They had not even had the meeting they came for. They were abducted and taken back to Uganda and put before the court.
We also saw the same with the
BCG.
We also saw the Tanzanian activists.
The effort. Turkish nationals have faced the same thing. Yeah. Rwandans have been picked up from where? South Sudanese activists and commentators have been picked up from here, disappeared for a period of time, and wound up dead in Juba.
So where are we heading as a country in terms of human rights protection as per now? Or maybe in the next few years? Where are we heading?
Continuing with that, because I want to know, is now Kenya becoming unsafe for exiles?
So that's the question for the government.
maybe.
It's a question for the government. Where Kenya is heading to is a troubling trajectory that I think it behoves all of Kenya. Kenya's civil society has always been largely free and very, very active. The media also is very strong. It is for civil society to continue to do what it is doing and refuse to be afraid, refuse to be coward. If we must continue to document as many of these cases as possible and hold the government's feet to the fire. They must feel the heat of what is happening. They are breaching their obligations under international law and Kenyan constitution, as well as African human rights instruments, including the African Union Refugee Convention. People who are here should have safe refuge. If you are registered, I saw someone this week with his refugee card who was abducted from here and taken to Uganda.
Wow. Let's leave the audience to think about that and to digest it, yeah? As we come to a conclusion, because I would like to know, yeah? After these abductions, we saw a lot of people going to court, the Law Society of Kenya, and we have seen the Inspector General defiling, and so he doesn't want to go to court, yeah? As requested by the courts, yeah? Also happening with the Attorney General, the Inspector General, and everybody from the police. They don't want to go to report to court, yeah? Just give a reason. And we saw the Law Society of Kenya and other law practitioners now requesting that it should be taken to the ICC. The next step should be the ICC, and that it has also been requested in the High Court. Do you think it's time for us to go to the ICC?
I honestly, looking at the Rome Statute that set up the International Criminal Court, I am not sure that these cases are at the level where it should go to the International Criminal Court, because the court is also very specific about complementarity. Now, there must be evidence of an unwillingness on the part of the Kenyan authorities to investigate and prosecute these cases. The International Criminal Court has a lot of, international crimes to deal with. Some of these crimes that have happened here are not at the same scale of, are not yet international crimes for which the court has jurisdiction. And so it would be to try to continue to make efforts to use the courts here in Kenya or the East Africa Court of Justice. And beyond that, but even those would require you to have made an effort to file the cases here, because it's a process. You start with the domestic. If that fails, it's not an appeal, but then you can file at the regional or the international level. And then there is the Africa Court of Human Rights and People's Rights.
Okay. We have seen our president, who is a very good supporter of Israel. Yeah, I'm so cautious about him. So our president is an associate of Israel. We have seen him also go visit interactions with the Israel Prime Minister. Yeah, and we have seen now there is a ceasefire in Gaza, Palestine, and Israel-related countries. Yeah, do you think this is going to have an effect to how Kenya and the African nation perceive now human rights?
Not necessarily. I mean, the one country in the entire world that took Israel to the International Court of Justice as a member of the Convention Against Genocide is South Africa. That's another African country. And I don't think, I think that is a record that Africa and Africans should be proud of. There are still rights respecting African countries. There might be double standards. There might be, even South Africa is quick to jump on the situation in Israel. Why not dealing with its own xenophobic violence and discrimination against other Africans in South Africa? But still, it's an effort that is nonetheless welcomed and celebrated. I don't think that President Ruto's visit to Benjamin Netanyahu is enough to erase that.
Yeah. So we are coming to a conclusion. This is now.
And I will just correct one thing.
Yeah.
Kenya is not the only African country on the UN Security Council. Usually Africa is represented by 3 at any point in time, and Kenya just joined as one country cycled out.
Okay, so this is a quick fire for the last 2 questions, yeah?
2?
Yeah, they are quick fire questions, they are very quick. So, according to your report, so you had located South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, you can see Eritrea, but we can see also Tanzania and South Sudan. We can see that you are not elected on the report, mostly Uganda and Somalia. Is this intentional? Is this lack of access to those particular countries?
So that what you're seeing, I think that's the Swahili summary. We cover all of those countries: Uganda, Tanzania, Somalia, Eritrea, Eswatini, Lesotho, well, wherever. There are a few countries in Africa that we do not cover just because we don't have the manpower or the expertise to cover all. And we don't have to cover all. But like I said, we cover 25 countries and includes most of the countries in East Africa.
Nice one. Let's give now a final question. Let's give flowers where it is due. Can you give me top 5 countries where you feel like human rights are being upheld properly in Africa?
That's a tall order because it's always a mixed bag. But I would say that in a few cases, we have seen progress in countries and especially at the international level in terms of how they vote and how they support human rights causes. I would put Botswana on that. I would add Zambia. Zambia has been good, small countries, but really effective. And, we consider them to be our partners. I would put Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, on that list, and to a large extent, Senegal, two French-speaking African countries that are making some progress. Gambia, I would have said yes, and I probably can still say yes because they are prosecuting, the former dictator in that country, Yahya Jammeh. Very few countries would dare to do that, hold a former, an ex-president to account for abuses under his regime. But they've done that even though they are trying to step back on some other important rights for the protection of women and girls. So I'll put the Gambia on it, and perhaps Ghana.
Thank you so much for that talking to us. Yeah. So, what's your now call to action as we conclude the call to action?
Continue to resist.
Continue to
Resist oppression, resist repression, and take courage.
Thank you so much.
There is always light at the end of that tunnel.
I love that. Continue resisting. Thank you guys for staying with us throughout this particular conversation. That is Madam Mausi Segun for you, the Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. And as she has concluded with a powerful statement that we should keep resisting and keep fighting for your rights and what you believe in. That was my beautiful time. My beautiful name is Shadow Collins Ongoi. Thank you. Until we meet next time, adios, muchachos. Peace out.